X and I'm with my co-host.
I'm Mariam, and we're gonna see the show.
We are. The cannon is going to be shot off in just a few minutes, so don't go anywhere because it's going to be a big boom in the inner harbor, downtown Baltimore on the USS Constellation. Please stay with us.
And before we call people forward, I'll just have all the visitors back behind the main mast here. For the visiting mast. You guys are good right here. During most of the presentation, I'll have everybody back here. I'll ask for some volunteers. I'll call you guys up. And I fired it one time and had a place to take it here. I fired it and I got the spirit pulled down. Alright, we'll begin. So, welcome aboard the USS Constellation. USS Constellation is the last all-sail warship designed by the United States Navy. Now, as a warship, we have some pretty important things aboard that make us a warship. Anybody have any idea what they might be? The guns, exactly. So, we are a 22-gun sloop of war. Now, what the word sloop of war means is that all of our broadside guns are on the gun deck below us. And the 22 part means obviously we have 22 guns. So of those 22 guns, 4 of those, which would be on the gun deck, basically in the 4 corners of the ship, would be our 32-pound long guns. Those guns are smooth bore, they're not rifled, and basically we've used them to shoot the rigging and things. About 2/3 of a mile in the range for those. In addition to those, we would have 16 8-inch chambered shell guns. The 8-inch chambered shell gun uses 14 men plus a ship's boy. Ship's boys are young men between the ages of 11 and 17 that would be basically serving on the ship. Your parents would volunteer you for the Navy. The Navy's going to feed, clothe, and educate your children for 1 voyage or up to 3 years. Usually 3 years happens before the end of one voyage. And then once you guys turn of age, you're going to have something you know how to do, so you can go to sea and be a sailor and have a job, have a career. So 14 men and a boy for each one of those 8-inch chambered shell guns. The 8-inch chambered shell gun uses a 9-pound black powder charge, fires a 52-pound exploding shell, 8 inches in diameter, about the size, a little bit smaller than a bowling ball. So, our overall range with those is about 1.25 miles. The effective range, however, is right around 1 mile. Now, unlike the 32-pound long guns, which fire a solid round ball, when I hit your ship with a solid round ball, what kind of hole do you think it's going to make? A round hole, exactly. How do you fix a round hole? A round patch or a round plug? So you plug it up. It's almost impossible to sink a ship using entirely round shot. Then we jump up to what we just talked about. The 8-inch chambered shell guns fire the 52-pound exploding shell. It's still round, but when it hits your ship, it's going to explode, making a nice jagged hole, sending splinters or shivers all throughout the deck, potentially wounding people, killing people. I said shivers, that's a big splinter. Anybody heard the pirates say, "Shiver me timbers"? Any pirate that says that, they're not the brightest, because they're pretty much telling you, hey, blow a hole in my ship. Make splinters out of my timbers. That's what they're telling you to do. Keep that in mind the next time you hear a pirate say, "Shiver me timbers," because we all see pirates every day, right? Yeah. So, and I don't think they say that anymore, just the ones on TV. Okay, so I mentioned about 1 mile range. That domino sugar sign down here, that's about 1 mile away. The 8-inch chambered shell guns could hit that domino sugar sign about 50% of the time. Remember, this is 1850s technology, so that's pretty good. 50% of the time. Also, we're going to use what we call ricochet firing. It means we're going to skip the round across the water, kind of like a stone. Skipping a stone across the pond. We're also going to aim for the length of the ship, not the width. So, for example, if you look over here to Chesapeake, or if you look out here to the Spirit, you know, it's longer than it is wide. So if your ship, let's say some nice round numbers, if it's 200 feet long and 40 feet wide, I've got a better chance of hitting a 200-foot wide target than a 40-foot target. And I'm going to use ricochet firing. Remember, we skipped that stone across the water. It's going to hit them right at the water line, making sure that we get a hole right at the water line. If I put a hole in your ship 5 feet above the water line, you've got a hole in your ship. That's about it. If I hit you at the water line, now you've got a hole in your ship. It compounds the problem because now you've got water coming into your ship as well. It's a bigger problem. So we want to hit them right about the water line. It's the most effective way to sink a ship. Okay.
Okay, were you enjoying this so far?
I am, and we're watching the Top of the Morning Show.
Top of the Morning Show. Please stay with us.
Ships built by the United States Navy. The ship you see here, the sloop of war Constellation, was built at the Gosport Navy Yard in Portsmouth, Virginia, and launched in 1854. A newspaper account from the day of her launch reported that there were 8 pieces of the original frigate Constellation contained within her timbers. The third Constellation was the aircraft carrier CV-64. Launched in 1960, she served until 2003. President to her story.
Throughout her century of service, Constellation served in and out of the Chesapeake Bay. It was kind of like coming home every time she returned to the Chesapeake Bay. She was created here at Gosport Navy Yard. And throughout her career, she came to Annapolis. She spent many years there. She sailed to Philadelphia. She sailed up and down the bay several times. Every time that she returned, it was like a homecoming for her.
Took part in the blockade against the Confederate raider Sumter, and showed the flag throughout the Mediterranean world. 1865 saw the end of Constellation's active sea service. From 1871 to 1893, home once again in the Chesapeake Bay, Constellation served as the practice ship for the midshipmen at the United States Naval Academy, where she earned the nickname the Cradle of Admirals. Constellation's restoration has helped keep Chesapeake Bay maritime trades and traditions alive. Today, Constellation is the largest example of Chesapeake Bay shipbuilding in existence. That's enough history for now.
So we've now talked about, anybody counting so far? How many guns did we talk about? Just 20 so far. We have 22, but we only talked about 20 so far. The other two guns that we would have aboard Constellation would be our chasers, our bow and stern chasers. At the bow, there would be a 30-pound Parrott rifle. I'll point up there. It's not up there today, but you'll all look anyway. See, I told you. The gun that's up there is not the one I'm talking about. Then we would have a 20-pound Parrott rifle, like the one behind me. The 30-pounder looks exactly the same. It's just a little bit heavier. It fires a bigger projectile. They made Parrott rifles up to 100-pound Parrott rifles, firing 100-pound shells. But we didn't have them on the ship. They were mostly land. The Parrott rifle that I'm talking about, the design for the Parrott rifle was made, basically, the guy that invented or came up with the design was Captain Robert Parrott of the United States Army. He designed the Parrott rifle. Aside from the fact that it's rifle, the main improvement is it's got this reinforced band, this 2-inch thick reinforced band around the breech to help keep it from exploding. Now, when Captain Parrott originally designed this, it was cast as all one piece. They went to fire it and it blew up, which is not a good thing. So then a guy by the name of Erickson comes along and says, you know, I think I can perfect this. So they decided they were going to cast the tube as one piece, and then they would cast the sleeve as a second piece. They would sleeve it, basically while it's warm, they would sleeve it over top, and hopefully if there were any imperfections in the metal, they wouldn't line up. So it made it a lot stronger. And that's the design we use here today. After Captain Parrott designed this particular Parrott rifle design, which if you want more information on that, you can see it on our sign behind me here later on. He basically resigned his commission in the United States Army, became the equivalent of a civilian contractor, made a little bit more money that way. So, you know. Okay. 20-pound Parrott rifle, it doesn't mean it weighs 20 pounds. It probably weighs about 2,600 pounds. Fires a 20-pound projectile. So when you hear me say it's a 42-pounder, or it's a 52-pounder, or a 20-pounder, we're referring to the weight of the shell that it throws. And usually, if they say a 20-pound shell, it's usually 19.5 pounds, but it's close enough for government work. Okay, so we're going to talk about how we load and fire this. For this, I'm going to need a few volunteers. I need at least 2 adult or older teenager volunteers for this, and then I'll ask for some young volunteers. I know the Navy stands for Never Again Volunteer Yourself, so if we don't get any volunteers, I will told you. Young man, if you could just not sit on the skylight for me, I just don't want you to fall through it. All right, so volunteers, I'll start with you. You're going to stand over here for me. Young lady, you can stand right here for me. All right, I'm gonna get at least 2 to 4 more. Step right up. I'll put you over on this side. We'll even it up. Anybody? You guys want to volunteer? You don't want to do gun drill? Anybody else? I need at least 1 more. How about you there in the red? You want to volunteer? If not, too bad. All right. Anybody else? I could use 2 more. Doesn't have to be kids. It could be adults too. Any volunteers? There you go. 1 more. You want to do it? All right. You gonna do it? All right. Outstanding. So how many do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Thought I had 1 more. How about 1 more?
Yeah.
All right, I'll do it. Go for it. I was gonna pick you anyway, so you can lay out anyway.
We fire the cannon, turn the capstan, and ring the bell daily. And we recommend the free self-guided audio tour, which comes in 2 flavors. One perfect for children, the other for adults. Plus, there's the ever-popular Powder Monkey Tour for kids and hands-on adult tours like A Ship as a Machine and Black Sailors in Navy Blue. Groups can also come aboard and sling their hammocks in our overnight program or host special events.
Hi, my name is Mariam, and you're watching Top of the Morning Show.
All right. So, the first command, by the way, you don't want to be standing on any lines. Only soldiers and farmers stand on lines because they don't know any better or they're too stupid to know better. So, the first command you're going to hear is going to be silence on deck, man the 20-pound parrot rifle. When I say that, each side is going to come up to your respective lines, not yet. And you're going to start right about, the first person will be right about here, on the outsides of the lines, and the other team on the outside facing in. And you're going to stand like this. That way I know your hands aren't doing anything that I don't want them to do at the moment. Silence on deck, man the 20-pound parrot rifle. Go. All right. Very good. You guys can step on close to the line. They don't fight that hard. All right. So, they've now manned the parrot rifle. Myself as the gunner, and I'm also going to be doubling up as the number 1 and 2 guys. So if you see me bouncing around, that normally wouldn't happen, and I'll explain that. The next command is going to be to cast, loose, and provide. That means I'm going to cast the lines loose on the deck, which I've already done, and I'm going to provide my implements. My implements is a fancy word for tools. I'll tell you all about it here in a second. After that, the command, run in, will be given. I've already done that as well. I have to pull the gun inward. That way I can load it. I have to do all the work from this end right here. So that's the reason we pull it in. After that, normally we'd only do this step about every 8 to 10 shots, after about 8 to 10 firings. But we're going to show you what it is. The guns down below didn't use this. They used something like a big shoehorn called a ladle. And they really didn't have to do this step unless there was a foul. But in order to search the piece, we use this thing. It's called a worm. It's basically a giant corkscrew, and what it'll do is I'll insert it down into the muzzle. It makes sure that I pull out any big pieces or chunks of any fabric or anything left over from the previous firings. And again, we do it about every 8 to 10 shots, so that stuff would build up after a while, so we'd have to pull it all out of there. Otherwise, it builds up and we never get a spark to our round. The command after that you're going to hear is going to be serve, vent, and sponge. Now, the gunner would normally be here like this, covering up the vent hole, which is underneath of this. This is my invisible gunner today. So he'd normally be doing this to make sure there's no air in there. That's the serve and the vent part. The sponge part is this giant Q-tip looking thing. It's a sponge. I would wet it down, insert it into the muzzle, swirl it around a few times once it gets down there, and it extinguishes any burning embers or sparks that might be present. Because if I go ahead and put something explosive down there, and there's a spark, when I'm pushing it in with the rammer, it's a good way for me to get the nickname Lefty. But if that does happen, myself and the gentleman who would be on the other side, we'd each be using one hand, they'd sew us back together, we'd switch places, and we still have a job with the Navy. So that's the sponge. After we do the serve, vent, and sponge command, the command load cartridge would be given. Now, unlike the guns down below that would have to load a powder bag, maybe some wadding, and then the round, up here it's all one piece, all held together by nickel bands, one piece. Our powder monkey, who we don't have today, but we'll just imagine, would go over to this hatch right here, and there would be a whip attached to that. A whip is a block and tackle system with one loop on it. He would basically, they would haul that up, he would grab the pass box, just like the box right over here, and he would bring that round up here and hand it to the guy standing right where my hand is. He would place the round right inside the mouth of the muzzle, and then together we would take the rammer, which is pretty self-explanatory, and we would ram the thing all the way down. Now what this cartridge would look like is it's a 2-pound black powder charge, usually with a wool domette flannel, very similar to flannel shirts you'll have today, a little bit heavier though. Then it had a wooden sabot, which is a little wooden disc, and then the 20-pound either exploding shell, canister, whatever they wanted to use, usually conical in shape with the exception of canister. All held together by nickel bands. It had a fuse on the very tip of that projectile. We put it in, ram it home. Now the gun is almost ready to be fired. After that, the powder monkey would go back over here. He would basically turn that pass box upside down, tap it a few times over top a bucket of water to make sure it deadens any powder. He would then send it back down. It would go down all the way to the magazine, where they would again repeat the process of tamping it over a bucket of water, take it back to the magazine and either refill it or grab another one for the next fire. Now that we have loaded the projectile, the very next thing we have to do is called to run out. Now, this is where my gun crew comes into play. You already have your sailor stance. On my command, run out. You're going to pick up your lines, and you're going to make sure that they're nice and tight. You don't have any slack in the line. Let's try that real quick. Run out! And just like that. Now, we're not pulling yet. There'll be 2 commands in order to haul this gun out. This gun gets up to 2,500 pounds. You guys are going to do all 4. Plus, however much that weighs. So, basically, there's 2 commands. You already have your feet glued to the deck. They never move. You don't walk backward. Command action, you'll reach all the way forward like this. And on the command haul, you'll pull with your forearm. We've all seen sailors like Popeye the Sailor Man with great big forearms. That comes from hauling line. It doesn't come from walking backwards. Not to mention, depending on where you're at, when you're hauling a line, you look that direction, eventually you're going to run out of ship. Not only that, you might run into someone. So, on the command action, we reach all the way forward, and haul, we pull. And we will repeat the process, so you only do what I tell you to do when I tell you to do it. Please watch your feet. We don't want anybody to get run over by the trucks. That's me, the wheels on here. But if you're too close to me, you're too close to my piece. Action! Reach forward. Not pulling yet. Haul! Action! Haul! Action! Haul! Action! Haul! Action! Haul! Stand by. And this is exactly what happens sometimes. So then you would have to adjust the gun using a trail spike. This is also how we sight it in. That's how we sight the gun. Action! Hold! That as well. It means you can put your lines down on the deck, and you can rejoin your groups. Thank you for your assistance, folks. Now at this point, I'll have to have everyone back behind the main mast for safety reasons. At this point, we would also be sighting in the gun. I showed you how that basically works for windage. Windage means left and right. Up and down, I stick it in here, lift the gun barrel up or down, and move the coin. That's this wedge that's right here. Coin spelled with a Q. I am then going to use my vent pick, or my priming wire. Sometimes people call it different things. I'm going to punch a hole into that black powder bag that I put down there. That way when I introduce a spark, it goes right to it. And I do that to make sure that I've punched open the bag. I'm then going to take a brass friction primer, which looks like this. Now this little brass tube is filled with fulminate mercury. Fulminated mercury is highly explosive. When I pull the pin, it creates friction, which ignites the fulminated mercury, which is only held in there by a little wax ball. shoots a flame down into that powder cartridge I just pricked open. At that point, it will launch this simultaneously as it fires out of the vent and somewhere down on the deck, which is why you're all back here. Catching it down the back of your neck or in your head or in your hair. It doesn't really hurt, but it will startle you. And we don't need anybody jumping overboard today, so we're going to be safe. I will insert this into the vent, like so. Notice I'm trying to keep my back to the gun in case it does go off. It doesn't mess all this up. Granted, you can't live without a spine, but you know. So then I'm going to take my lanyard or my pull string, looks like this, and I'm going to attach it to the loop in that friction bracket. Like so. And the piece is now armed. Now we're going to talk a little bit about safety. I personally think this gun's about as loud as a 4th of July firework. Keep in mind, I fire these things all the time. I've been dealing with explosives my whole life. I fire these things a couple times a day. If you choose to cover your ears, you will do so with the palms of your hands only. No fingers. The force of the explosion could drive your fingers into your eardrums. So, anytime you hear a loud noise, always use the palms of your hands. You're also going to want to, and I'll say ready first, you don't have to do it yet. You're also going to want to stand on the balls of your feet. And if you don't want to do any of that, or in addition to that, I should see everyone at least opening their mouths. It will equalize the atmospheric pressure, making you less susceptible to concussion or internal bleeding. So, if you do all 3 of those, I'm very serious, however. You all laugh, but I'm very serious. If you do all 3 of those, you're going to look like this. A little goofy, but safe. Okay, I'll give you the disclaimer. I can't guarantee this gun will go off every time. Every now and then, we have misfires. If that happens, I'll do my best to correct the problem and get us a nice loud boom. I'm going to do a few safety checks, make sure we don't have any hazards, and then we'll begin firing. Again, I'll give the command ready like this. When we're ready to fire, you can cover up if you'd like. Attention on the finger! I'm going to fire my gun! I'm not shooting at you!
That's actually a good idea. Get your fire pose.
Still, I'm not shooting at you.
Attention below in the captain's cabin! If you're in the captain's cabin, get out! And to make sure we don't have any water taxis coming, you actually look pretty good at the moment. On the 20-pound parrot rifle, prepare to fire! I didn't say ready yet. Make ready! Fire! Ow, my arm! Cool. And there you have it, folks. Thanks very much. And of course, you're only clapping because nobody's shooting back at you. So if you folks have any questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them. If you like, we do have a donation box inside. Keep in mind, I just spent about $10 of the ship's money. It doesn't go to paying my salary. It helps with upkeep, restoration, and doing presentations for the public. We also, there may be some comment cards in there. If you liked what I did here today, my name is Chief Nat, N-A-T. Feel free to write a comment, drop it in the box. If you didn't like what I said here today, I encourage you to take one home with you. Fill it out in detail. Mail it in, care of the USS Constitution. Have a great day, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them for you. Thank you, folks.
It's just amazing to see what people lived in, how hard they worked in order to accomplish what they did.
It brings your learning alive, and that it helps you to understand. Like, rather than looking at pictures, you can actually see what they were in, and you can actually understand it.
I think it makes me appreciate being an American, knowing these people went through these things to put me where I am now.
I'd say come see it.
Yeah, we were a little bit leery because of the age of our children, 4 and 7, but they enjoyed it so much. It really kind of surprised us. We thought it'd be more for us, the parents, but no, they loved it.
They had a good time.
Yeah, they had a great time.
So come aboard USS Constellation, and while you're here in Baltimore, be sure to visit these other attractions of the Chesapeake Bay Gateways Network. The Baltimore Visitor Center, a good place to start your tour of this historic city and region. The National Aquarium on Pier 3 near the USS Constellation Museum. The Lightship Chesapeake and 7-Foot Knoll Lighthouse, both part of the Baltimore Maritime Museum. The Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Maritime Park and Museum, headquarters of the Living Classrooms Foundation. Fells Point, an early American shipbuilding center, and the Fells Point Maritime Museum. And of course, Fort McHenry National Monument, where the people of Baltimore valiantly defended the city from the British during the War of 1812, and Baltimore's own Francis Scott Key wrote our national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner. So welcome aboard USS Constellation and enjoy your visit to the historic sites of the Chesapeake Bay Gateways Network.
Welcome back. We're still on the USS Constellation. We still have that band playing on shore, so we're both going to have to speak up loudly. For those of you that don't know a lot about the USS Constellation, it's sometimes confused with the USS Constitution, which fought in the Revolutionary War. This one, however, though, saw duty off of Trafalgar, and I'm sorry, not Trafalgar, but off of Tripoli, over in the Mediterranean. It helped deal with some of the pirates. It is one of the oldest, I understand, one of the oldest square riggers still left afloat, and it's right here in the Baltimore Inner Harbor. So, now you've not toured the ship before, right?
No, yes, I never toured the ship.
You haven't had a chance to tour the ship?
Never, yeah, this is my first time.
First time,
yes.
Okay. Well, down below you can see how the crew lived. Of course, there's the captain's quarters. If you've ever seen movies that have old sailing ships, the captain always has gorgeous quarters. The crew sometimes, I think, suffers, but the cabin, they always get great places, and this ship has one of those, although it's a little on the Spartan side. So you can see how the crew lived. There's a famous book. Are you familiar with the book called 2 Years Before the Mast? It's a famous book if you haven't read it already. It's one that you should read in your literature classes. It was written by Richard Henry Dana, and the reason it's called 2 Years Before the Mast is because the crew lived in what's called the forecastle or forecastle, which was in front of the first tall mast. So he spent 2 years living before the mast, and it's his story. I can't remember exactly when it was, maybe 1865, when there were still sailing ships. Went from the East Coast all the way down around the tip of South America and up the west coast of South America, and then even up into California. It's a marvelous story, and it makes you think that we have a pretty simple, easy life compared to how these people lived, because the ship he was on was actually smaller than this ship. USS Constellation, a wonderful place to visit. They've got great tours, and of course if you get here right before noon, you can hear that cannon fire in person.
Wow, Steve, that was a great story, and I enjoyed that.
Well, and you can see that if you come down here and you're around right around noon on the USS Constellation at the Inner Harbor, downtown, beautiful downtown Baltimore. I want to make sure I get that right. It's a great day trip.